and welcome back to Propulsion Lab at Devoxx UK. Come to you live from London, and with me again, Mr. Dotan Horovits. Welcome. This time with sound, hopefully.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments or whatever if this time the sound works. We don't know because we don't have any monitoring or observability of our production system.
That's true.
Which brings us to the topic of our discussion. No, it's really that, right? So we think that we did everything right. We kind of sorta have monitoring on what's happening here live. Like we know that the speakers work, and I see levels on my microphones, and it gives me the false sense of confidence that, you know what, we did everything right. But the production system, which is our stream to Gradle, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, where you probably watch us, have no observability. We don't know if it works. We rely on the end users to tell us whether we have a problem or not. What do you think about this setup?
I think you gave the perfect analogy and the perfect example. We did the whole stream yesterday, and it came out muted for those who didn't follow the excitement yesterday. So it only gave us a second chance, but you don't always get a second chance, and also the price and the cost when things roll out to production and start falling apart is sometimes something very, very costly. And this is the importance of observability, whether you're in production, as you said, but also for the developer experience.
Yeah, so on the bright side, it gave us perfect example of the importance of observability. It almost like we planned it that way, which might be or maybe not. You will have to guess whether it was all planned that way or not. But in any way. So you mentioned, so I guess observability in production in 2024, it's kind of sort of granted, right? I think everybody understands the importance of it. There are great companies like Dotan that invested a decade working on tools for observability. There are great open source standards like OpenTelemetry that kind of taken for granted by now, and they should be. It's like you obviously have observability for production systems, but the question is, for me, the observability part was always on the ops side of our DevOps world, in which the developers don't really interact with it or care about it or have responsibility for it. It's like, okay, our production systems are observable. If something goes wrong, we know, but it's not a part of their daily work and their daily life. And I, for one thing, it should be changed. And what do you think about that?
So I think that we see, first of all, yes, it started off on the ops side of DevOps, and I think very true that knowing that our production systems are up and running, that's the first and foremost for many of us. However, with the shift left trend and the more responsibility that is given to the developers, you see much more the developers meet that in their daily life. And first of all, it starts being on call. You know, when you're on call, you're also in charge of the production system, and it could be very, very painful. I can give you an example from just a couple of days ago. I was speaking at another conference at OpenSearchCon Europe in Berlin, and my topic on conversation was actually about CI/CD observability. And I gave examples from our journey at Dotan, from the engineering, on the on-call engineers that had a lot of time that it took when something broke on the release pipeline to figure out what the heck is going on and how to resolve that. And this lead time for change, this is a principal DORA metric, one of the 4 DORA metrics, is been too long for us and too painful and too costly. So for us, for example, this was a journey to observability from the build process cycle and from the release cycle from the CI/CD side of the house. So this is, for example, an example where when you have good observability into, in our case, it was Jenkins back in the day, and understanding exactly what happened, whether it's code-based, like someone released code with a bug, or whether it's environmental, and you can just kill a service Jenkins server and just let the autoscaler spin it up and everything goes back to normal, or anything other than that is very, very important.
Yeah, I have my observability right here. I'm checking that we have sound, and we do have sound, which is a good sign. All right, no, it's actually, We look very good on our monitoring dashboards. We look excellent. We probably need to come up with some better idea to observe it, except of opening on my phone. But it is what it is right now. So you mentioned obviously. Mean time to recovery. Something goes wrong, we need to know about it, and then obviously the developers who might be in charge for fixing the problem need to know about it as soon as possible, so they work with the same dashboards and what's not. But let's take it even further. How about not the on-call and not the monitoring, but really the development cycle? Is there a place for observability there?
I think so, very much so. And you mentioned the OpenTelemetry just before, and this takes me back to my talk actually here at Devoxx UK. I gave a talk about using distributed tracing in Java applications and how to use OpenTelemetry open source project for that. I'm also a CNCF ambassador, so it's also part of my way of spreading the good word about the open standards and open tools. And the thing about that is, for example, many engineers and developers don't even understand when you talk about my microservice architecture, even the relationship between the microservices. You have hundreds, sometimes even thousands of services. You're in charge of developing a single microservice out of this mess, but understanding the relationship is something very, very much not trivial. And the thing is that going back to some sort of a doc that shows you the system architecture is not effective and also not maintained, let's be honest between ourselves. And then coming to the point where distributed tracing, for example, is a form of observability that actually generates for you, out of what's deployed there in production, your live system architecture or dependency graph, dependency diagram. That's one example of just understanding the relationship between the microservices in your architecture. That's one example. Another example is when you need to start debugging. You have an endpoint there, and suddenly there's a performance issue, a latency issue, and you're tasked as an engineer with improving the performance. Where do you go about? And again, each request is being served by a chain of interacting microservices, maybe tens or hundreds. How do you find the place where most of that latency is going down and the critical path where you need to invest most of your efforts? And this is a place where when you have distributed tracing and suddenly you see exactly the time break where each hop, each operation, how much it took, which one ran in parallel, which one ran sequentially. Maybe you can parallelize by adding a thread pool or a queue for your database queries or whatnot. This is the sorts of things that developers love, and it can boost their development cycles.
That actually makes tons of sense. And I think this is very, very critical for developer productivity because, if it takes you 3 days to figure out your microservices architecture, you are not being productive. Exactly. So we definitely need to pay more attention on observability for our development lifecycle, and standards like OpenTelemetry and tools like Logs.io can definitely help. So keep an eye on that and just learn more about it. Where we should watch your talk, I guess.
Yeah, my talk was yesterday, but you can also follow my podcast. I have a podcast called Open Observability Talks, focused exactly on DevOps, open source observability, platform engineering, and the like. So do check it out on your favorite podcast.
Okay, so
YouTube.
we need a dedicated episode about open observability for development.
Yeah. But one point that that is worth mentioning before we finish this chat is about getting really down to the lines of code. Because we talked about the symptoms, we talked about the microservices, but in some cases, what we realized, bringing it really shift left to the developer, is actually, okay, you're trying to root cause, and assuming it's not environmental, but rather code-based, get you down to that code. For example, we at Logs.io, we found repeatedly that it happens, so we're trying to take you, once you understand the problem, to take you down. If it's on GitHub, for example, you connect the GitHub repo, and then with a click, you can take you right down to that code segment where it's potentially with the error. So this is the trend that I've been seeing with tools. You see that with the open source tools, you see that with vendor tools like Logs.io and others. But I think this is where we're heading as an industry and as a community to connect the development environments, the IDEs, and also down to the, first of all, that you don't need to context switch to another tool to get observability. And secondly, to get you down to the line of code that maps to the issue at hand. So closing the loop from the symptom all the way to the root cause analysis, that's the real power of observability.
This is absolutely where the industry is going, and this is the shift left. one more step for you to do is opening this line of code not in GitHub, but in the IDE.
Yeah,
That's the next step. We're looking forward. Dotan, thank you very much. That was excellent. That was much better than yesterday. None of you know it, but it was actually much better than yesterday. The magic of rehearsals, I guess. Yeah, so I hope you liked it. Stay tuned for more of this awesomeness at Devoxx UK, this Propulsion Lab, coming you right next in your next break. And with that, Dotan, thank you.
a pleasure, Baruch, as always.